Hi, everybody. Obviously, I am not here today. I had to take my daughter Georgiana to an appointment. What we're going to be spending most of our time today is preparing you guys for the in class debate on the atomic bomb and whether or not it should have been used. And that in class debate is going to happen next Tuesday. A couple of reminders. On Friday of this week, you have your chapter 24 through 26 quiz. It was on the calendar. And also due the same day are your chapter 27 notes. So we're going to start our conversation on this very controversial and still very complex issue today. And I want to just make sure that you guys understand that, this is a debate that no side has a clear advantage in. I think if it's fair, the last two debates that we've done, yeah, there was one side that definitely had a little bit of an edge towards the other. But the arguments and the evidence are so compelling on both sides that I think it's going to make for a really great debate. So what I'd like you guys to do now is you're going to watch the footage of the atomic weapons being detonated. And there's four things I'd like to point out. First, you're going to see the scientists that worked on the atomic bomb detonate 100 tons of TNT in order to calibrate the atomic blast. They really didn't know how they were going to measure it. So the first part, you're going to see all these stacks of dynamite piled together in boxes, and then they detonate it. And then you will see Trinity, which was the first time in human history an atomic bomb was detonated. It was detonated on U.S. soil. And then, of course, you will see the bombings on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of World War II. The video itself is good. It's got some really great footage in it. There are some parts that are a little corny. William Shatner is the narrator, so for all you Star Trek fans out there, there you go. There's the original Kirk. So what I'd like you to do now is just sit back, relax, and watch this clip.
May 1945. The hot New Mexico desert seemed far from the ravages of war in Europe. "100 tons of TNT, a rehearsal to scale and calibrate the power of an untested atomic weapon. "2 months from this day, man would unleash the destructive power of a demon locked within the very fabric of matter and plunge the world into the atomic age. For the next 20 years, testing the power of the atomic bomb would hold the world captive by events shrouded in secrecy. Events set into motion 7 years earlier.
March 1938. Hitler invades Austria. The Third Reich begins to flex its military muscle. Later that year, German scientists discover fission of the uranium nucleus, bringing the Third Reich one step closer to discovering the secret of the atomic bomb. Fear of German research stimulated activity in the United States and England. Fear that German scientists could produce weapons of great devastation. In the fall of 1939, Dr. Albert Einstein wrote his now famous letter to President Roosevelt, explaining the urgency of work on uranium fission. Roosevelt, a man of action, moved swiftly. An advisory committee on uranium was appointed. German forces invade Poland, plunging the nations of Europe into a Second World War. A new branch of the Army's Corps of Engineers was established to administer work on military uses of uranium. Major General Leslie R. Groves, the man responsible for the Pentagon, was placed in charge of the project. On December 2nd, the first self-sustaining chain-reacting pile was successfully operated by Enrico Fermi. Fermi's success brought intense efforts between government and the private sector, creating huge industries for uranium separation in the town of Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and for the production of plutonium in Hanford, Washington, at the shores of the mighty Columbia River. This tremendous effort forged the materials necessary for creating an atomic bomb. The first atomic bomb was assembled at Los Alamos, a secret laboratory in New Mexico. When Dr. J.R. Oppenheimer arrived to take charge, he began to surround himself with a galaxy of outstanding scientific stars. From Los Alamos came the bomb design and treatment of many theoretical problems. Yet many questions still remain unanswered. What are the secrets of this new source of power and destruction? Knowledge and information on all aspects of this new weapon are essential and can only be discovered by further testing.
The uranium gun weapon, or little boy bomb, was a simple design, and scientists were confident it would work without testing. The Fat Man, or implosion bomb, was a more efficient design, using plutonium instead of uranium. Inside the very center of the bomb was an initiator, surrounded by a sphere of plutonium. This sphere was encased within a set of symmetrically located, high-explosive lenses, creating an implosion which forced the plutonium into itself, attaining critical mass. The blast instantly raised temperatures to 10 million degrees, releasing a force of 1 million pounds of pressure, vaporizing the tower and all desert life within a half a mile. The intensity of light was sufficient to cause temporary blindness to an observer 10 miles away. With a yield 200 times greater than the 100-ton test, the fireball created a crater nearly 1/2 mile across and fused the desert sand into a green glass still containing traces of radioactivity 50 years later.
Pearl Harbor plunged the United States into war. For 3 years, gathering momentum with each small victory, our forces had conducted an offensive against the war-bloated empire of the rising sun. Slowly, island by island, mile by mile, and then with ever-quickening sweeps, the combined land, sea, and air forces of the Allies drove against the borders of that empire, forcing it back until late in 1945, only the bastions of the Japanese home islands remained to be stormed. Ahead lay the greatest campaign of all, invasion of the Japanese homeland, and close-in, desperate fighting. That this fanatical enemy would not quit until her last fighting man had been driven from his cave and killed had been established time and again by bitter experience.
Okay, everyone, now that you watched the clip, you should have already picked up, if you haven't yet, please do, the document set that is titled 1945, The Decision to Drop the Bomb. There are 7 documents in this set. Some of these documents call for the use of the bomb. Some of them said that it was the wrong decision that Truman made in dropping the bomb. And both teams are going to have these. What I'd like to do now, though, is divide you guys up into your teams. And if you look around the room, you will see at the front of the classroom, near where the agenda is, you will see a yes sign. And at the back of the classroom by George Washington and our We Like Ike poster, you will see the no sign. So you'll notice also that the classroom is divided into tables roughly of 6 on each side, 3 total. So I'd like everyone, please, right now to, once I put the slide up, to go ahead and move to your groups. And then once you move to your groups, we will continue. Okay, so here are the groups for 4th period. Go ahead and move into your groups now. If our substitute teacher could please pause the video at this point and allow people time to move, that would be great. Okay, here are the groups for 6th period. If our substitute teacher could please pause the video at this point, this will allow people to move to their side of the room. So please do so now. Okay, so at this point, what I would like to have happen, if it has not happened already, is for each side to pick up their document set. Your side's document set will be clearly labeled yes or no on the front side. And please note that everyone needs to have one of these for their respective side, but you may not take a copy of the other side's argument set. So if we could please distribute those now, if the yeses could please pick theirs up, followed by the nos, that would be great. Okay, so now that you guys have been divided up into your groups, and now that you have all your documents, this is the task that you have. What I would suggest is, based on how you guys are divided up, is you need to divide and conquer. You have quite a lot of information to go through in roughly about an hour and change this period. So what I would suggest is that you jigsaw this in the following way. If I have, say, 12 people in my group, I would divide up the documents in 3 sets. One table could look at the 7 documents that everybody got and then divide them up accordingly. The other 2 tables could take, whether it be a half page, a page of the debate documents and become an expert in them, read them. And then the real idea here, folks, is to be able to get through this efficiently. So what it's going to require is that everybody takes a piece, and you guys can figure out how you're going to do that. And then there will be a report out period within your groups where each person goes through and says, okay, so when I was annotating this document, here's what I saw, here's what I highlighted. I am going to be awarding points for the annotation as long as it's done sincerely and you're not just highlighting random stuff. You will be given 100 points for successfully annotating these documents. These are going to be turned in the day of the debate. As long as you do the work properly, you'll get the points for it. If you don't do anything, or if you just highlight random stuff to make it look like you annotated and I don't feel it's sincere enough, you won't get the points. Really, your goal should be, by the end of this period, is to get through the documents as quickly as you can. Try and complete your points of argument. There will be roughly about 20 minutes of prep time on Tuesday for the debate, but please don't count on this for anything more than just game planning. So what I'd like our substitute teacher to do now is to please pause the video and give folks, about a half hour or so to work. And then after that point, if we could please start up the video, because there are 2 more points I'm going to come talk to you guys. After you work a half hour, we'll watch a little clip of me explaining some other pieces. Then you'll work a little bit more, and then the last 10 minutes of class or so, there's a final clip I'd like to leave you with. So if our substitute teacher could please pause the video now, that would be fabulous. Okay, so just as a reminder, this is the question that we are debating. Should the United States have dropped the atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of World War II? Some of you are arguing yes, this should have happened. Some of you are arguing no, it should not have. And what I'd like to look at now is some additional information for both sides to consider. Okay, so for those of you arguing the yes side, you want to look to the left-hand column. These are some things to consider as you are developing your argument. First and foremost, the Japanese had the lowest percentage of surrendering troops during World War II out of all the major powers. An example of this is the Battle of Iwo Jima, which was considered part of the Japanese island chain. It housed a force of over 20,000 Japanese soldiers, and when it was attacked after 2 months of really brutal fighting, only 218 Japanese prisoners of war were taken after the Battle of Iwo Jima. And what this is kind of hinting towards is the fact that there is a part of Japanese culture that suggests, or at least at the time, that suggests that death in battle is a very honorable thing, and that surrender is a very dishonorable thing. And so rather than be captured, many Japanese troops did commit suicide. Many of them just simply fought with the tenacity that really couldn't be rivaled by many other troops in the war. But when you think of the fact that you're the American president and you're fighting against an enemy this dedicated, it gives you pause to think, well, should I use these atomic bombs or not? And clearly, if they're going to fight to the last person, that tells me I have to end this war quickly. Another thought to consider is that conventional bombing, which is essentially a fancy way of saying, normal everyday bombers just, using multiple bombs to bomb cities into submission, killed way more people in Japan than the atomic bombings. The atomic bombings are sudden, they're devastating, obviously, in an instant, killing over 200,000 people, but there were far more people that were killed in Japan thanks to just regular bombing. And we see this in document 1 of our document set, where it says, over the couple of months in early 1945, close to 900,000 Japanese civilians were killed with conventional bombs. Also, we have to acknowledge that the American public in 1945 was really relieved that the bombs were dropped. Remember, these are folks that were living in the midst of the environment that is, or I should say that was, World War II. And many people had relatives and family members serving overseas, and they wanted the war to end. The war had ended with Germany, and the bombs were so sudden and such a devastating blow that it was seen as, oh my gosh, the war is going to be over now. So in 1945, the American public was relieved. And then, there is a debate among some historians that, and people, in the international community, that perhaps the United States should be brought up on war crimes because they were the first and thankfully only nation so far, hopefully it stays that way, to use atomic weapons. But I think that that's a very slippery slope when you consider how brutal the Japanese were to their opponents in World War II. The rape of Nanking, what occurred in China, where close to 80 to 100,000 women of all ages were raped. You had people being used for bayonet practice. I mean, very, very gruesome practices against the occupied Chinese people and the surrendering Chinese army in Nanking in the late 30s. Also, after the surrender of the Philippines, where 74,000 American soldiers, Marines, as well as Filipino soldiers, surrendered the Japanese, the Bataan Death March, all told, killed about 10,000 of those. And the treatment of POWs by the Japanese particularly was very brutal. So, for those of you arguing the yes side, these are some things that you want to consider. For those of you arguing the no side, I mean, yes, there were 200,000 deaths, and the U.S. military at the time said that both Nagasaki and Hiroshima were military targets, but we since have found out that 95% of the people killed in the atomic bombings were Japanese citizens. And remember, World War II is a total war. Civilians and soldiers and sailors on both sides were killed, and both seen equally important. But to say that these were military targets would be incorrect. We also know that one of the co-pilots of the Enola Gay, which was the bomb that dropped, which I should say the plane that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, had said, it was the captain, the co-pilot, said, "My God, what have we done? How many have we killed after the bomb was detonated?" You also hear an argument that this was done as a preventative measure to prevent the Japanese from prolonging the war long enough to where they can invade the U.S. mainland. Even at the height of their military strength in 1942, the Japanese could not have sustained an invasion of the U.S. mainland. Obviously, they attacked the U.S. territories of Hawaii, the Philippines. They also invaded and occupied some of the Aleutian Islands up in Alaska. But to be able to invade the West Coast, it just wasn't feasible. They didn't have the manpower. They didn't have the resources to sustain it. And lastly, for those of you arguing the no side, Japan was beaten. I mean, after Okinawa, their navy, their air force was so depleted that it really was only a matter of time before they were going to surrender. Just to give you an example, the Enola Gay, which carried the first atomic bomb, was only escorted by 2 planes. Now, you would think that the U.S. would, protect this plane with more than just, 2 additional fighters or fighter bombers. But the Japanese Air Force was so depleted at this point, there were no planes even sent up in the air to intercept these planes as they flew over the city. Japan was defeated, and it wasn't necessary to use the bomb on them at that point to try and win the war because the war had already been won. It was only now a matter of time for when the Japanese would surrender or through diplomatic negotiations, how that would occur. So this should give you some good food for thought as you develop your arguments. So if our substitute teacher could please pause the video and give people an additional, 20, 25 minutes to work, that'd be great. We do need the last 7 to 10 minutes of class for the last portion. So go ahead and pause the video now. Okay, so we're going to wrap up our conversation here. And I wanted to start with, what were the things that President Truman and his advisors considered in dropping the bomb on Japan. And this information comes from official documents that were later declassified, everything from memos, diary entries, meeting minutes, etc. Truman and his advisors acknowledged that in 1945, the U.S. was the only nation on Earth that had not only the raw materials to make the atomic bomb, at least in mass, but also they were the first to successfully construct one that could be detonated. And with this acknowledgement, it shows that the U.S. realizes that in 1945, no nation can touch them, whether they be their former enemies or their current allies. There is no nation in the world that can challenge the United States for supremacy. So that's a lot of power to have kind of in your grasp. In the same vein, Truman realized that there's no way we're going to keep this secret forever. And sure enough, the Russians were able to successfully detonate a bomb in 1949, 4 years after the war had ended, thanks in large part to their own espionage in stealing plans from the United States. In terms of the military benefit that the bombs offered, Truman said this is a shock and awe thing. We're not going to benefit from this in any military capacity. The war is not necessarily going to change because of the bomb from a military standpoint, but in terms of a shock and awe standpoint, in terms of the devastation that's caused, in terms of getting the Japanese people to call for the unconditional surrender, that really was the goal. And I think we also have to say that Truman and his advisors were not going in blindfolded. They knew these bombs had the capability, if they were mass produced, of destroying civilization. So with that comes a great responsibility, which he also acknowledged. He said, listen, the U.S. has a moral responsibility whether we use these things or we don't. If we use them, we have to say we use them for these purposes, and we have to own that. If we say, we've created these destructive weapons, but you know what, we're not going to use them, then we have to own that too. And that's something that's often not considered. It's pretty understandable now that obviously history has been written in this case to say, well, yeah, the U.S. bears a very huge moral responsibility for making the decision because that impacted 200,000 people's lives, 95% of which were civilians. But at the same time, if the American president's job, or at least his or her first duty, is to the American people, then if you decide not to use these bombs, which could end the war, you're essentially saying to the American people that, I'm going to put our soldiers and sailors and airmen, etc., at risk rather than use these destructive things. So Truman said, whatever we do, we have to own it. And that's something that definitely will help inform your conversations amongst your groups. So what you're going to hear from right now is Paul Tibbets, who was the American colonel who piloted the Enola Gay that dropped the first atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. He passed away in 2007, but as you will see, he, along with many World War II vets, obviously have their opinions on the dropping of the bomb, and they range from all over the place to whether some were for, some were against it. But many of them were not only for it, they said that even with hindsight, they would go back and do it again because of the time period in which the event occurred. So please go ahead and watch this clip on Paul Tibbets sharing his thoughts on the use of the atomic bomb.
We are standing in front of the first atomic bomber, the Enola Gay, a storied B-29 which carried the revolutionary atomic bomb.
We shall completely destroy Japan's power to make war.
The end of Japan's aggression was in sight.
Colonel Tibbets, will you tell us some of your reactions over the target?
We saw this cloud of boiling dust and debris below us with this tremendous mushroom on top. Beneath that was hidden the ruins of the city of Hiroshima.
My assignment, you are going to organize and train a unit to drop these atomic bombs. He said, Paul, you got a tremendous amount of responsibility there. You got a tremendous amount of authority. Be careful of how you use it. Hiroshima was a selected target. It was definitely a military objective. As we got into the airplane and got ready to go, some of the cameras were still out there, and I stuck my head out to ask them, please remove the cameras and the floodlights and all that so we could start cranking up. You don't know what to expect when somebody tells you it's going to explode at 20,000 tons of TNT because you've never seen 1 ton explode. It is reported that Lewis wrote in his diary note words to, quote, "My God, what have we done?" After we turned around and he got a look at it, he said, Jesus Christ, look at the size of that thing. And of course, we all had the same feeling. All of the people involved with this, and even the United States war effort, was something that we felt was absolutely justified in light of the times that they were performed. I'll never change my mind on that. Being the commander of this 509th Composite Group and charged with the use of these weapons, I can only reflect on the fact that nothing was ever done like it before. Nothing will ever be done like it again.